Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Time for another show. I just realized yesterday we spent the intro time talking about how it was Cinco de Mayo, which, while exciting, it did distract me from pointing out that it was also 5/5/25. Woo! That's not enough numbers to go and buy a lottery ticket on, but you could have added that. Anyway, starting to get used to the transition of the Netroots radio team to Microsoft Teams. Although, here's something. I have Microsoft Teams on my phone, although it doesn't seem to auto-refresh all that easily in terms of when a new message comes in. But if I keep it closed, I'll get a notification on the front screen. But if I open it up and then leave it there, I'm stuck staring at the last message. So, all right. Well, at any rate, I happen to know the pattern to the patter in the morning, so I think I'll be able to stay on top of these things. So then the next question is, I assume there's a way to do it, but is it a gigantic pain in the ass to run Microsoft Teams on a Macintosh desktop or laptop? I haven't done that yet, but I know, I think they're pretty heavily Macintosh. Just generally speaking in the Netroots radio space, but I'm not certain. I haven't checked on that. So we'll see. And perhaps they have some answers about that and how easy and simple it is. I did get the notice this morning from Skype, which starts up automatically when I turn things on here. And I guess now I can disconnect it from my soundboard setup. But, okay. And Justice says he's running Teams on the MacBook Pro, so it's clearly the Mac Pro, and so it's clearly possible and doable. All right. Very good. I don't know. I'm from back in the days when that could not be done, or couldn't be done without some sort of, also running some sort of weird background simulator that would probably make everything go kablooey. Anyway, I'll get around to downloading that because I think it'd probably be easier to keep on top of the messaging. Although this one, again, this time, now that it's open, the Teams message came through in real time. So I guess it's working just fine, but we should have redundancy here because if the show is about nothing, if not redundancy, certainly that's the case. All right, time to get started. There's so many things happening. Sometimes I just feel like I should open up my email and read you all the promotional emails from the newspapers because it's a pretty good summary. That they've made work well. I don't know whether they have AI behind that or not, but the algorithm for other sites, the YouTubes of the world, etc., are insane, and I don't know why. No matter what you prefer, they're just going to start serving you the right-wing content as soon as possible. But they have it right in targeting the emails. I still occasionally get crazy misdirected right-wing alerts of some sort, but mostly not. They seem to, it doesn't help keep the clutter down, but they seem to have a pretty good fix on what it is that I want to be seeing. All right, well, it's Tuesday, and that means we're formless and structureless. So we can go in any number of directions, and why don't we just go with stream of consciousness, the whims. What's been capturing my attention as I was getting ready for the show? There's a million things, substantive stories of interest to those of you in this news space. But I thought I'd start by, I saw something else that was weird and philosophical. Gave us a philosophical launching point here. I happened to see the discussion of an NPR story on Palantir, as they say in their headline here, secretive tech company that is rising, as they say, in the Trump era. And the excerpt taken from it in a discussion was of some interest. Let's see. I don't know if the article is super long, but we could take a look at it. Anyway, I happened to see it being passed around by, maybe you follow along with Sanho Tree as well. I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly. It certainly doesn't look complicated, but who knows? But you may also follow him on Blue Sky, perhaps left over from the Twitter days. An interesting guy all around, and we all seem to share a lot of common interests, unsurprisingly. Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. I didn't just say he was an interesting fellow. I meant he's a fellow. And he's interesting. Ex-historian, I don't know how you get out of the historian racket, posting about drug policy, social justice, Ukraine, and such, just according to the Blue Sky profile here. And seems to me like there's some pretty heavy overlap in his following and our circles, so perhaps you may have seen this thing as well. It's just interesting. Palantir, he notes, and then parenthetically explains that it is the extremely creepy surveillance company co-founded by Peter Thiel in 2003, although everything is co-founded by Peter Thiel, has a stock market valuation that climbed from $50 billion a year ago, $50 billion stock valuation a year ago, now approaching $300 billion today, worth more than Verizon or Disney. And I think in the article they note about as much as the Bank of America. Anyway, he says, think of it as Blackwater, you remember them? Still around. But with computers instead of guns and armor, which I guess is supposed to, I don't know, it's not supposed to be any more comforting, but I don't know. There's the scary factor of guns and armor and, oh, computers, that's nice. Well, not if they're stealing all your data and watching everything you do. That's the point here. But interesting thought, and I was just struck by the idea of the valuation increasing like that. So what is that? How many multiples here? So from 50 billion to 300 billion. So you make a ton of money if you happen to be invested in it. And sometimes I do, wonder. Well, all of these horrible things that are happening, and it's a disaster for America and the world in general. But since the whole drive here seems to be the effort of these billionaires to take away all the money from everybody else and keep it for themselves, yeah, how bad is it? I mean, you don't want to be funding this stuff, but it's happening anyway. Like, is there any ethical way to invest in any of these companies and grab some of these profits and then say, I'm now going underground with my own survival bunker and leaving? No, I don't think that there is. I mean, there are other ways to invest ethically, I guess, and make money. It's just astonishing how quickly they make money. But then that's what kind of occurred to me here in reaction to this is what's going on here. I mean, should we be reading about it, what they're up to and what they're doing, or just asking the philosophical question about the increase in valuation? Maybe if we have a little background as to why they think their valuation is increasing, and then we can give our version of it afterwards. We get a clearer idea. Bobby Allen is reporting this for NPR, how Palantir, the secretive tech company, is rising in the Trump era. Just substantively important story for us in news gathering and news understanding anyway. But there's another side to it. So Palantir CEO Alex Karp, with a K, K-A-R-P, could not suppress his excitement. Hooray. He was on an earnings call in February with the data mining company's shareholders. Its profits were skyrocketing. Karp was bursting with glee. We're doing it, Karp exclaimed, and I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am. Indeed, Karp and Palantir investors have much to enjoy. They have much just in general, really, and a lot of it used to be yours. Palantir, and, of course, many of you recognize it right away, but if you didn't, you'll now roll your eyes and say, oh, of course, yes. The name comes from the Seeing Stones from the Lord of the Rings books. So Palantir has been booming. Its stock market valuation has climbed from $50 billion a year ago to approaching $300 billion today. A company that few outside of tech and national security circles would recognize is now worth more than Verizon or Disney, and nearly as much as Bank of America. And let us remind you, the Bank of America business model is everybody just puts money in their pockets. Okay. Palantir is here to, ready, Disrupt. Woo! That's the key buzzword. Here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world. And when it's necessary, to scare our enemies and, on occasion, kill them, Karp said on the Investor call. Promoting how a company's products assist in killing is an unusual corporate pitch, but it is indicative of Karp's brash and bombastic style. He once said he would, don't ask me how he comes up with this, he would love to spray his critics with, quote, light fentanyl-laced urine, unquote. Business genius, obviously, right? I'd like to spray my critics with light fentanyl-laced urine. That's so indicative of business acumen. I want to know how to crack the eccentricity barrier. And I mean, the answer is money. We know that. But I want to know, how do you get there? Like, there just so many people I've read about over the years, particularly in tech, where they're first of all, they look like they just crawled out of bed. And I mean, I can do that. And two, well, they're so eccentric and they say such crazy things. I can do that. Like, what do I have to do in order to get people to buy into the idea that the fact that I haven't brushed my teeth or showered or put on clothing that you could go on the street and speaking in, riddles and idiocy, why isn't that worth millions of dollars for me? What do I have to do to set that up is the question here. And in some cases, somebody else has done the work of building the company. They just come in from elsewhere. Just thinking back, I don't know. It's now 5,000 years that I'm thinking back. But this is the model of this for me. Does anybody else remember the guy referred to by his weirdo nickname of, what was it, Shingy? And he was occupied the position of digital prophet at, of all places, America Online. Good prophecy, by the way. You're a great digital prophet. Meanwhile, he's still, I think, probably still out there, unshowered. I don't know. Maybe he's highly styled and very hygienic, but he doesn't look like it. Yeah, although he looks like he's playing with the Cure in the 80s. But whatever. I'm not supposed to fixate on those sorts of looks, but he's probably out there still making a ton of money, convincing people he's a digital prophet, despite the fact, again, how could you be any? I don't know how you could be like, oh, I'm all about predicting the future. Yeah, where did you do your chief work that launched you into the stratosphere? Oh, America Online. Yeah, there must be around. I don't even know what they're doing now. But anyway, they're not sending me any more CDs in the mail. Okay, so anyway, that's who comes to mind. And this guy, just physically reminds me of him too. The look, the unkempt look. Anyway. Guess what? Palantir is here to disrupt. Promoting how the company's assets kill, right? Unusual. Then he, something. I don't know whether light fentanyl-laced urine is supposed to be about killing or it's just weird because urine. You tell me. The tousle-haired 57-year-old billionaire, the story continues, holds a doctorate in neoclassical social theory to no great end, I see. And when he's not philosophizing about Palantir, he can be found Nordic skiing. Anybody could be Nordic skiing. There's Nordics all over the place who are nice people and skiing. Or practicing Tai Chi. He keeps a wooden Tai Chi sword in his office. Okay. Anyway, he describes himself, and here's the twist for us. Ready? He describes himself as a progressive warrior whose support of Democrats over the years, including Kamala Harris for president, has been in contrast to Palantir co-founder Peter Thiel, a billionaire who is one of President Trump's longtime backers. Yeah. That doesn't mean he's not a weirdo. So are you. All right. I was going to say, so am I, and that's true too, but it's more, this is my fentanyl-laced urine spray here for you. You're the weirdo here. See? My brash and bombastic style. Send money. Anyway, and I just got an email about saying anyway to everything too. So, all right. Well, there you'll see how I told you, Gil. This is how I use this thing. It's just a humorous transition. Anyway, where Karp and Thiel merge is around a shared devotion for developing data analyzing intelligence tools, as Karp has put it, power the West to its obvious innate superiority. And that's where he jumps off the progressive train, I guess, but okay. Now in Trump's second term, Palantir is emerging as a key private contractor as the administration intensifies its crackdown on people who are in the U.S. without legal status. All right. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but Western superiority. I mean, they're from the Western Hemisphere. No, well, we mean us, white people here in America. Okay, so some of the other terrible things they do. Next section, from Gaza, okay, to Trump's immigration crackdown, from terrible to terrible. While the company is famously secretive, it does at times lift the veil on its technology. Palantir's AI software is used by the IDF to strike targets in Gaza. And that's unclear to me. There's a link. We could go read about it. I'm unclear. Like, AI software is used to strike targets. Well, wasn't it, though, the story that the AI software was being used to select targets? And that was kind of, well, the whole thing is super dangerous and crazy. And this is just one reason why it's even worse. Or is the AI really doing the striking? But that's even, more upsetting and dangerous. Anyway, it's meant to be noted in passing as we go on to saying that it's used to assist the Defense Department, ours, in analyzing drone footage, and the Los Angeles Police Department's my three top favorite institutions so far, relied on Palantir's predictive policing tools, oh boy, to forecast crime patterns. And that doesn't send chills. We are not a commodity. We do not want our customers to be commodities. We want them to be individual titans that are dominating their industry or the battlefield, Karp said in a November earnings call. Sure, me too. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement records show Palantir recently received a $30 million contract to build a platform to track migrant movements in real time. Wired and CNN have reported that Palantir is being tapped by Elon Musk's dodgy boys to create a master immigration database and speed up deportations. And Dodgy has hired numerous former Palantir employees. Palantir's new work with the Trump administration follows 2 decades of gaining ever larger government contracts. In November, Palantir secured a nearly $1 billion software contract with the Navy. Since Trump took office, Palantir has been eyeing even more government work, and that's what we're getting at here. And the company's stock has surged more than 200% from the day before Trump was elected. Having political connections and inroads with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk certainly helps them, said Michael McGrath, the former chief executive of I2, and that's lowercase I, number 2, the data analytics firm that competes with Palantir. It makes deals come faster without a lot of negotiation and pressure or democratic input, collaborative decision-making, transparency, the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's a whole balance of this article that I think would be very interesting to discuss and would probably lead to an interesting discussion. What I came here for was really in that part. So we'll pause here. And that's the question. So for the valuation of the company to go from $50 billion a year ago to $300 billion now, or nearly $300 billion, and one of the most, allegedly valuable companies on the market, given that it is side by side with titans like Verizon, which you know what it does. Disney, you know what it does. Bank of America, you know what it does. Palantir, now you know what they do. Why are they valued at the same amount? And so the question here is, the profile, you sell the profile to Alex Karp, let us interview you with, you're going to look like the business genius that you think you are. So my big question here, the philosophical approach to all this, because he's a philosophy guy, right? So is this business genius? Is this incredible foresight? Like we knew early on that data analytics and artificial intelligence and surveillance in general, that there was just going to be a huge, huge market for it, and we were going to have the ability to disrupt the technology here and become a leader in the industry. Is it disruption at all? Is it, revolution? What's happening here? Is it any of those things, or is it just political capture of the public purse strings? I mean, it's one thing to say, well, clearly there was going to be this trend toward interest in technology for whether for, as Pete Hegseth would say, war fighting, or for police activity, or for anything. I think it was fairly predictable, and there's a certain amount of foresight that might have gone into it, but this is easily reproduced, I guess. Not easily. I have not done this. But this is also could be reproduced, or it would be indistinguishable side by side from simple political capture of the purse strings. And these things are priorities because the financial backing for appropriators and decision makers in the government says you better make it important. You better direct that the state start pouring money down this spigot, and it should be spending its money on surveillance and on technological war fighting and data analytics, and it just so happens that's what I sell, and we're supporting you so that you will get into public office and be given partial control of the public purse strings, and you will make the decision that the government should be purchasing this stuff, and holy cow, I'll be the one to sell it to you. I mean, it happens, and I don't know if we could say it's a legitimate end of politics, but it pretends or purports to be a legitimate end of politics, and the protection from that simply being just a racket and nothing else is supposed to be. This is the ironic part to me, I think, is the democratic nature of the decision-making process, policy-making, decision-making, appropriations, etc., that it's diffuse, distributed power to make those decisions, and you have to either convince or capture a lot of people across a pretty broad, used to be a broad chunk of the spectrum of political positions. You had to put together a bipartisan coalition, no longer necessarily the case, which that too is an outgrowth maybe of the candidate in a box theory that we sometimes espouse here. It used to be the case if everybody was just sort of being independently elected, it wasn't a given that if you captured one political party or another, you would be able to produce the majorities necessary to pull a trick like this. But if you pre-programmed everybody from one of the parties, then if that party gains a majority, you're in. You're in, like, you name it. What? I don't know how you're supposed to actually end that idiom. I've seen too many. I remember too many things, and some of them may be the ghosts of memories. Anyway, the point is, you can do this, right? Now you can, if you capture the Republican Party and they're in the majority, you can convince them that you need this sort of surveillance technology, that this is how people are winning wars. This is how you can fight your immigration problem. This is how you can reduce crime. Whatever it is, even if they don't think that there's a crime problem or an immigration problem, if you spend enough money convincing them that there is one or showing them that it's a political winner, there will be one, and they will tell the newspapers that there is one, and people will demand solutions, and you will say, I am contracting with these guys to buy those solutions. Those are the guys who bought me my seat, but, either you don't need to know that, or if you do need to know that and you cause trouble with it, we will survey. Now we can surveil you and arrest you, and or tell MAGA weirdos on Twitter to harass your family. Okay, so that's really my big question here is, did we need this stuff and these guys had the foresight to invent and provide it, or is this what they were working on and we didn't particularly need it, but they wished we did, so they spent all their money convincing the body politic that we did need it so that they would get all their money back and more. And is this a $50 billion company or a $300 billion company? And what's the difference between the two? And it's ironic that if you allow democracy, democratic rulemaking, democratic decision-making and spending decision-making to happen, there's a lot less chance that you reap gigantic profits. That's true, but it tends to legitimize the nature of those profits. If people genuinely, truly, and transparently make their decisions and come to a consensus, we need Palantir's technology and buy it for the public, on behalf of the public, on behalf of the government, congratulations, you've done a great job in the free and open marketplace of ideas, if that ever really existed. If, on the other hand, you simply elected a bunch of people whose job it was to declare that they needed your product and then you bought it, not so much. So then the question becomes, do they care about whether or not they're proud of themselves for having built a company that's widely recognized as important and necessary, or do they not care? And as long as I get the money, I don't care why I'm getting the money, except insofar as what do I have to keep doing in order to keep getting it? That's the analysis I'm performing. Or am I doing something good enough inherently that society is finding its own way to directing me riches? And my assumption is that they don't really care and possibly can't tell the difference, because even at 57 years old, Alex Karp has pretty much grown up since in the Reagan Plus era, when there was no difference. It was the dollars that determined your value, not what you were contributing to society. And you have to be about 80 to still believe that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, I think we can be done with Alex Karp and Palantir. It looks like the article is helpful in understanding what's going on in the background. And I guess if you need to know who your new tech overlords are, or if you want to evaluate whether or not he's salvageable as a progressive, I guess we could look at that. It might prompt questions like, why isn't he spending his money on a progressive infrastructure the way Peter Thiel is spending his money on a right-wing infrastructure? I don't know. And it may never happen. But I don't know. That's sometimes a question people ask. Mine was a little different. Anyway, lots of other things that we ought to be covering, and let's get to some of it. Maybe there's a transition from that to, I guess, we'll use the fact that they're a surveillance company to segue to the word spy and spy agencies appearing in a headline that I thought I might want to share with you. But this brings us back to the courtroom realm, I guess, and back to our continuing and very interesting immigration cases that rise to, constitutional interpretation, the Abrego Garcia case and everything surrounding it. New York Times has this information for you. Charlie Savage. Good. Let's have Charlie Savage redeem himself. Last time his assignment was to write a roundup piece, and he performed admirably in it, but we had already learned all that information already. But the job appeared to have been tell us what's already happened and what you've already filled us in on. Sum it all up for us. So he did great. Now he's back out there digging up facts. Here's what he's got. Spy agencies, ours, do not think Venezuela, the country, directs gang, and in particular, Tren de Aragua, a declassified memo shows. So in other words, this appears to be a declassified memo that has fallen into the hands of the press somehow here, maybe it's described, that undermines the whole Alien Enemies Act claims that Trump's administration has been making for declaring gangs to be both an invasion, so that, in the sense that would justify the use of the Alien Enemies Act, or, whatever. You see the whole point of this. The basis for invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Well, the reason is less scrutiny of decisions made to deport people without any serious process. And even then, it's not a correct interpretation. Most of the courts are still saying, well, there needs to be due process to understand whether or not the people you're talking about deporting, if that's even the right word for it, fall under the jurisdiction of the Alien Enemies Act. Right. And it's much easier, and you've got more latitude and power if they do. But in order to use the Alien Enemies Act at all, it needs to be used for wartime, for the repulsion of an invasion or whatever, of war being fought on your own territory. Not necessarily that it be on your own territory, but that there be a real actual war here. This is 1798 we're talking about. They weren't really, grasping the idea of ideological warfare in the internet ether spaces. That doesn't count. They meant real war. And so they needed rhetoric that made people believe or think of immigration as an invasion. And then the gang idea was just to help them bootstrap that. If there was such a gang as Tren de Aragua, and it really was transnational, and it really was something that originated and had a specific country of origin in Venezuela, and it was really true that the vast number of Venezuelan migrants to the United States were in fact affiliated with this gang, and it was also true that the very evil, and we're so mad at them, bad Venezuelan government was in fact in cahoots with this gang and was encouraging them to make incursions into the United States under cover of being just the humble migrants, but in fact, an organized force dedicated to the invasion and overthrow of the United States as directed by the Venezuelan government. Well, then that would be, of course, justification for using the Alien Enemies Act. So you might ask, does anybody who usually helps make these decisions, as besides presidential speechwriters saying you need to refer to this as an invasion, sir, does the military doctrinally recognize this as an invasion? Do the intelligence agencies recognize this as an invasion? Do the intelligence agencies confirm the administration's claims of what's even going on? Just in terms of the physical aspect of it. This many people from that country, are they here? Is there any reason to believe they're actually affiliated with one another? Well, apparently the memo says no. The release of the memo, the subheader says, further undercuts the Trump administration's rationale for using the Alien Enemies Act to deport scores, that's all we have here, scores of Venezuelans to a prison in El Salvador. And I guess that's good news. It's only scores. The threat was that it was going to be hundreds, thousands. And I'm glad it's not, but just another failure that, the Trump regime in promising, weren't they going to deport 11 million people or something? And now we're like, well, it's bad and horrific how they're doing it, and they should be blocked from doing it and required to return people, but scores is all they've managed so far, even with all the splashy headlines and money being spent. Charlie Savage is joined by Julian E. Barnes in the byline on this one. A newly declassified memo released on Monday confirms the U.S. intelligence agencies rejected a key claim President Trump put forth to justify invoking a wartime statute to summarily deport Venezuelans to a prison in El Salvador, which really never made any sense at all, no matter what act you were using. The memo, dovetailing with intelligence findings first reported by the New York Times in March, states that spy agencies do not believe that the administration of Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, controls a criminal gang, Tren de Aragua. That determination contradicts what Mr. Trump asserted, I can't believe that would happen, when he invoked the deportation law, the Alien Enemies Act. By the way, also floating out there is not only do the intelligence agencies not believe that there is any control by the Venezuelan government, but also I referred you to, I think before the weekend, the story that casts some doubt on whether or not Tren de Aragua is really even a thing at all, much less a gang controlled by the Venezuelan government. So, there's that. And there was another thing, too, that occurred to me as I was reading the end of the previous paragraph, and now I can't bring it to mind. But anyway, maybe it'll come up again. So, while Venezuela's permissive environment enables TDA to operate, the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States, the memo said. And I think there was... the news, it was supposed to connect to another news article, and maybe we'll see it when we scan Pocket again. But just once again, another sort of memo evaluating the entire overarching narrative that Trump was trying to weave together in order to justify the use of government power to root out and remove migrants, just by fabricating a story that would make it scarier and so therefore, I guess, more acceptable to Americans to ignore our normal constitutional mandate for due process in general. Okay, so the memo's release further undercuts the Trump administration's rationale for using the Alien Enemies Act and calls into question its forceful criticism of the ensuing coverage. After the Times published its article, the Justice Department opened a criminal investigation and portrayed the reporting as misleading and harmful. The administration doubled down a month later after similar coverage in the Washington Post, citing the disclosures in both articles as a reason to relax limits on leak investigations. So, if the death of due process bothers you, well, wait a minute. What about the death of the First Amendment that we'll use to prosecute you for reporting on the death of due process? That sounds reassuring. The document, known as a Sense of the Community memo, was released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in response to a Freedom of Information Act request by the Freedom of the Press Foundation. The foundation provided a copy to the Times. Why the Trump administration continues to comply with the Freedom of Information Act, I have no idea, but they clearly are not scared of letting people know what they're up to in most cases, which is a little disconcerting. Lauren Harper, the Daniel Ellsberg Chair, how do you like that, on government secrecy for the foundation, that is the Freedom of the Press Foundation, said the memo was at odds with the administration's portrayal of its contents as a dire threat to public safety. The government almost immediately declassified the same information in response to a FOIA request. She said, Ms. Harper continued, the declassification proves that the material should have been public from the start, not used as an excuse to suppress sharing information with the press. That might be the less concerning part of this. But administration officials continue to defend Mr. Trump's policy. And here's a quote from Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI who oversees the office that declassified this. It is outrageous that as President Trump and his administration work hard every day to make America safe by deporting these violent criminals, some in the media remain intent on twisting and manipulating intelligence assessments to undermine the president's agenda to keep the American people safe, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, said in a statement. Well, that whole thing is upside down and backwards and at odds with the findings of the intelligence community that you oversee. A Justice Department official said in a brief statement Tuesday morning that the gang had terrorized Americans, important because it doesn't just mean people are terrified of immigrants, doesn't mean that they are terrorists. It just means, I mean, at minimum, it means some Americans are a little paranoid and weird. They may have reason for it. They may not have reason for it, but we can trace it to your rhetoric. But being terrified doesn't mean that they're the victims of terrorism necessarily, just because they share the same root word. Anyway, there it is again. The White House did not respond to a request for comment, not surprising, although they love commenting on things. Until Mr. Trump invoked it in mid-March, the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century law, had been used only 3 times in American history, all during declared wars. It says the government may summarily remove citizens of a country that is at war with the United States, or otherwise engaged in an invasion of or predatory incursion into U.S. territory. So invent that, right? Immediately afterward, the administration sent plane loads of Venezuelans to a notorious high-security prison in El Salvador with no due process. Courts have since blocked further transfers under this proclamation, citing evidence that some of the men there were likely not gang members. The ACLU has asked the judge to order the Trump administration to bring back the Venezuelans for normal immigration hearings. On its face, the Alien Enemies Act appears to require a link to a foreign government. Yeah. Mr. Trump declared that Tren de Aragua had committed crimes to destabilize the United States. Quote, at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Well, you know, we do afford the president a lot of latitude to make those kinds of proclamations, but they are usually supported by documentation. They could be fabricated documents. They could be fabricated claims with real documents. They could be some mix of both, but you got to do the paperwork, and he hates doing paperwork. But the Times reported days later that the intelligence community had circulated findings on February 26th that reached the opposite conclusion. The shared assessment was that Venezuela's government and the gangs were adversaries, even though some corrupt Venezuelan officials had ties to some gang members. So basically, the intelligence community is of the opinion that Tren de Aragua, to the extent that it exists as a gang, is at most a rival power center to the Venezuelan government. The Venezuelan government would like to suppress their activity. They may, I guess it's possible, they may yet still work in concert occasionally. That happens, even here, but only on a very limited basis, I guess. So they say, nope, the Venezuelan government and Tren de Aragua are adversaries, even though it was, of course, the case that some corrupt Venezuelan officials might have some ties to gang members. It also said the gang lacked centralized command and control and was too disorganized to carry out any instructions. The Times also reported that only the FBI partly dissented and thought there was some kind of a link, but it was based on information that the other agencies like the CIA and NSA thought was not credible. The Trump administration asked the National Intelligence Council, made up of senior analysts and national security policy experts who report to Ms. Gabbard, to take another look at the available evidence. On April 7th, it produced the memo released on Monday. The Washington Post reported on the memo, which remained classified, later that month, further angering the administration. I wonder if that's the article I'm thinking of. Now in public view, the memo said the intelligence community based its conclusion on a series of factors. Venezuelan security forces have arrested Tren de Aragua members and have, quote, periodically engaged in armed confrontations with TDA, resulting in the killing of some TDA members, the memo said, showing that the government treats the gang as a threat, unlike, say, the current United States government and, the Proud Boys or Adam Waffen, for that matter. Those guys aren't treated as a threat anymore. They used to be. Other countries might worry about our collaboration between the government and our various street gangs, but where they used to feel fairly confident they were still adversaries. While there is evidence that some mid to low-level Venezuelan officials probably profit from TDA's illicit activities, the memo said, the gang's decentralized makeup would make it logistically challenging for the organization as a whole to act at the behest of the government. The memo also shed additional light on the FBI's partial dissent. It said that while FBI analysts agreed with other agencies' overall assessment, they also thought that some Venezuelan government officials facilitate TDA members' migration from Venezuela to the United States and use members as proxies in Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and the United States to advance what they see as the Maduro regime's goal of destabilizing governments and undermining public safety in these countries. Well, it would be an ambitious project. We've seen it in operation elsewhere. It's happening with Russia. But Venezuela is a far cry from having the ability to project its power internationally, I think, from Russia. And Russia's is declining, but they have more practice with it and a greater infrastructure for it. The FBI based its view on people detained for involvement in criminal activity in the United States or for entering the country illegally, but most of the intelligence community, quote, judges that intelligence indicating that regime leaders are directing or enabling TDA migration to the United States is not credible, the memo said. In examining the available evidence, the National Intelligence Council evaluated whether detainees could credibly have access to the information reported and whether they had offered details that could be corroborated about support the Maduro government had purportedly provided the gang in exchange for following its directions. While portions of the section were redacted, the memo signaled skepticism. The detainees' legal troubles, it said, could motivate them to make false allegations about their ties to the Venezuelan regime in an effort to deflect responsibility for their crimes and to lessen any punishment by providing exculpatory or otherwise valuable information to U.S. prosecutors, right? You get picked up for some crime or another, and they threaten not only to prosecute you for the crime, but to deport you and maybe even send you to that jail in El Salvador, and you don't like the idea of that. And so you say, what if I told you that I was sent here to assassinate your premier? I knew it, comrade. Pay up. Anyone recognize that arcane reference? Spies Like Us, Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd are inept spies, not even really spies, but they want to be spies, and they get dumped into Russia, right? Or into then Soviet Union, and they're basically unclear on what their mission even is. And upon capture, they just spit out, we're sent here to assassinate your premier. You get captured as a Venezuelan migrant, and you're arrested because you actually, I did a crime here in the United States. They got me fair and square. They're going to deport me, but they might send me to this El Salvador prison. What if I told you, actually, I'm here as an agent of the Maduro government. I heard that you guys were looking for that. Just like as we were looking at capturing people on the street in Iraq, however many years ago, looking for, I need you to tell me that you were Al-Qaeda and that you helped Al-Qaeda launch the 9/11 attacks, and that's why you're fighting an insurgency here now that we've invaded Iraq as well. Please put that together for me as a confession so that Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney's dad, could be politically vindicated. And if necessary, maybe we stick some hot needles under his fingernails or something, torture the guy so that he'll say this stuff. That was the big problem for me back then. You're torturing random people to make them tell stories that make it look like when you were telling stories, you knew what you were talking about. Even though everybody, again, in the intelligence community was saying, yeah, we're not finding anything like that. Well, I'll torture somebody into telling that story. Here, we don't actually have to resort to that, although there's the threat of it. I don't know what's going to happen to you at CCOT, but if you don't want to go there, you better tell a story that corroborates President Trump's fever dreams about TDA being manipulated by the Maduro government, run by the Maduro government. But remember, Trump has campaigned numerous times on the idea, what has he said? He said outright that Barack Obama was the founder of ISIS. Remember? Okay, he's just speaking metaphorically. That's our Trump. What are you going to do? It's just Trump being Trump. Well, that one didn't fly. But probably because, Barack Obama, for better or worse, known quantity here in the United States. ISIS, for better or worse, not a known quantity per se, but we know what that's supposed to be. And it was, so outrageous and evil and foreign and all of its, and everything that it did. It was just too hard to believe, even for major MAGA people, that it was literally, there's still a percentage who will say, yes, I believe it and mean it. But for Republican voters in general to say, is Barack Obama really literally the founder of ISIS? No. But is it easier to believe that? I don't know who Nicolas Maduro is, most people would say, and I don't know what Tren de Aragua is. But given that over in Russia, I do know what Russia is, and Vladimir Putin, in fact, is using international criminal gangs based in Russia to do the bidding of the Russian government, I suppose it's possible. Sure, why not? I'll buy this one too. So anyway, as we were saying, while portions of this section were redacted, the memo signaled skepticism that this was even possible for something like Tren de Aragua, which is only barely an organization to begin with. In late March, the memo noted, Chilean officials told the International Criminal Court that they suspected that the murder of a Venezuelan man in Chile last year was carried out by a cell or group linked to the Tren de Aragua, that was politically motivated and originated from an order by Venezuela's government. The Maduro administration denied that accusation, which they would do whether it was true or not, I'm sure. And there, too, I guess, maybe a parallel to Russian stuff trying to carry out assassinations on foreign soil. Do they use pure government intelligence operatives for that, or do they employ people who are deniable, even though clearly, obviously Russian? In other words, are they using international criminal syndicates to do this work? And might not the same thing be happening with Venezuela? Also, an interesting mention of the International Criminal Court. I see Liz Cheney is back in the news again, occupying that weird space between where she's making sense, but also everyone should remember that she's Liz Cheney. She had like a 7-point plan for combating the Trump regime, and everybody, quite rightly saying, how is it that she has a more organized plan of attack here, a battle plan, than Democrats as a whole, as a party do? Well, it's an individual versus a party, so it's a lot easier to come up with a plan and get it approved if you only have to approve it yourself. But I did note that one of the things was the United States should be joining, or I guess rejoining, the International Criminal Court in preparation for, I guess, having the Trump regime tried after they're removed from power. Yeah, maybe it's wishful thinking. I'm just noting for the record that it was Liz Cheney's and Dick Cheney's Republican Party that rejected the idea of participating in the International Criminal Court and withdrew from the International Criminal Court primarily, I think, maybe not primarily, but certainly in part in fear that Cheneys would find themselves on trial in front of the International Criminal Court. Now they need the ICC to put their enemies on trial so that their enemies don't put them on trial in regular court here. it's a little convoluted. But we'd probably be better off on balance as a member of the ICC. So you don't have to hand it to her, but you might take her advice. And if you don't like taking her advice, it could just be, hey, common sense, international consensus says we should be a part of that. And for the moment, Liz Cheney says so too. But the memo also said that other parts of the intelligence community had not observed or collected evidence of communications or funding flows showing government officials providing directions to leaders of the gang, even though such a relationship would likely require extensive such interactions. Another one of those situations where this conspiracy theory that you have here lacks any evidence. And how would it be possible to coordinate this much action among this many people across this much territory without any evidence at all? Well, that's what they want you to think. Judges so far have stayed away from second-guessing the truth of Mr. Trump's factual claims in deploying the Alien Enemies Act. They have to entertain the possibility that he's acting in good faith for some reason. The day after the initial Times article, Todd Blanche, a former defense lawyer for Mr. Trump, who just now happens to be Deputy Attorney General, announced that the Justice Department had opened a criminal leak investigation. So is it true that this story of the connection of Tren de Aragua to Venezuela's government is not true? I don't know, but I know this. You might be under arrest for saying so. In a statement, he criticized the article, saying the information in it was classified, which it isn't, but also inaccurate. But the declassified memo supports the Times' reporting. In an interview in Megyn Kelly's podcast last week, Tulsi Gabbard said that the reporting on the intelligence community's conclusions was being investigated. Not, are they right, but who told the press and can we arrest them for saying that they read the memo? Leakers had selectively and intentionally left out the most important thing, she added, pointing to the FBI's belief that the Maduro government was supporting the gang's activities in the United States. But the articles in both the Times and the Post did discuss the FBI's contrary view. Last month, Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote in a memo that she would roll back protections for press freedoms in leak investigations, citing the Times and Post articles as damaging examples of leaks of classified information, which they're not classified. In an Espionage Act case, just to bring things back around, Espionage Act, Alien Act, and then the Sedition Act used against the Proud Boys on January 6th, prosecutors must prove that someone knowingly made an unauthorized disclosure of defense-related information that could harm the United States or aid a foreign adversary. The government's declassification of the memo raises questions about any case that could be brought over the Times and Post articles. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm scanning through, or I have been spending the last minute scanning through Pocket to see if the article I was thinking of is A, is parked here, and B, does it jump out at me? Is this the one that I meant to bring up? And I'm really not sure. But there's been a lot of reporting of late about how the basic assumption, the basic effort by the Trump administration to construct this whole theory whereby there's the theory by which they turn an immigration problem into a war problem. And really, I don't even know if they really necessarily want to do it. They just have been interested in making people equate immigration with an invasion so that they could invoke certain presidential powers to remove people. They don't want these people in the country, and our, basic constitutional freedoms are what's getting in the way of rounding them up in whatever vehicles they can stuff them into and getting rid of them and putting them in a place where they won't be able to simply, recharge their batteries, pack up again, and come back to the United States. Not that, by the way, being dumped back in your country of origin is any way or some other country, just some other damn place where they speak Spanish. Who cares? It's in the region. Throw them there. I mean, it's really rather disgusting, honestly, on that level. Not that that's a good way to recharge your batteries. It's not a vacation. but I mean just literally like, okay, find something to eat, get some bags, and start walking and get out of there as soon as possible. But that's one of their concerns. People just keep coming back. We deport them. They keep coming back. Yeah, well, they're humans with autonomy and they're going where they would rather be. And just in general, the imperative that's driving them, fear for their lives or just fear that they won't be able to make a living and survive in anything but abject poverty wherever they are, that's a pretty powerful driver. Eventually, yeah, it's going to come down to, are you going to kill them rather than let them in? And unfortunately, we have purportedly elected a regime that says yes to that. We happily will kill them. We think that the large chunk of the American populace will probably object to that, and very strongly, and maybe even the international community, in ways that might result in our, trial, death, whatever it may be. So we kind of have to disguise this and come up with some sort of legalizing methodology for all of this. And that's it. That's what we have to do. But it's going to come down to as I have said, I think in the past, the imperative to migrate is just that strong. And it's really, look, I'm going to die where we are. The threat of death, at least there's a chance I might get past the guns at the border. And Trump is just working to make it impossible to do so. Less likely that you'll be able to escape the field of fire at the wall. It's quite serious and quite upsetting and disgusting. And I guess eventually we're all going to have to confront it. Okay. So, as I said, there's more that we really need to get to. There's a reference in the New York Times article that we just read to a Washington Post article. It might be the one I was thinking of from April 17th. U.S. intelligence contradicts Trump's justification for mass deportations. And I don't know, but this is something that they're threatening the Washington Post and New York Times for reporting about. Now that the memo is declassified, I don't know if their case holds together. But I have a feeling this essentially, I was going to say restates, but it pre-stated what we just read in the Times. There's some more discussion of the declassification process in the Times article, but anyway, but it doesn't immediately remind me of, there was something else I think that I wanted to connect. Maybe it'll occur to me along the way, but we need to change gears. There's a million other things we have to do. First of all, I guess we'll say it this way, because why not? I could do a whole podcast. I should do a one half-hour podcast a week series. That counts as a podcast, unlike this 2 hours a day, 5 days a week thing, and call it the 2-week report. Why? It would only be reports on and discussions of Donald Trump saying that something was going to happen in 2 weeks. You guys know that I'm not kidding when I say on Blue Sky, where you can't hear me doing it in the same way that you can on the podcast, that I literally laugh out loud every time I read an article and Donald Trump says something is going to happen in 2 weeks. You know it's true. People think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. There's a new one. And yes, in real life, even when I'm not podcasting, in my house, you will hear from another part of the house, I'm laughing about something. And people now know, I wonder if that means Donald Trump said 2 weeks. I laugh at a lot of things, but I laugh differently at this one. Well, there's a new one. Trump to announce pharmaceutical tariffs, quote, in next 2 weeks, according to the Times of London. That's the one that gets to call itself just the Times. The president's apparent attempts to get production moved to the U.S. could affect companies in Britain and Ireland, which are big exporters. We don't care as much about it affecting Britain and Ireland as they do there in Britain and Ireland. But okay, I'm not going to read the whole article, just going to say that President Trump has said he has plans to announce pharmaceutical tariffs, quote, over the next 2 weeks. Oh my God. Now, I'm not laughing because I set this up already. And I've already had my laugh, but haha for the record. Next 2 weeks, as he steps up his efforts to return supply chains and production of critical industries to the United States, which is not going to happen for the reasons previously discussed. I guess I really only laugh when I get surprised. I'm just reading. Okay, he says he's announcing new tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Everybody, it's important. Let's read the thing. Blah blah blah. He says it's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. If it surprises me, yeah, there you go. You get to laugh out loud. I do wonder why reporters don't laugh the same way. I did wonder, because it's so incredibly funny. Like, once you're attuned to it, like the Wilhelm scream thing, it's just funny that he keeps doing it, and he's so unaware of the fact that he keeps doing it on everything, and it's such a tell, and he doesn't seem to know about it. Although a while ago, and it might be 2 weeks ago, that he referred to something else taking a slightly different period of time, 3 or 4 weeks, which is funny in its own right. But I guess maybe the reason you don't laugh out loud in a press briefing room is they'll be like, who just laughed? Find out who that guy is. And if we can't arrest him, harass his family. That's a good explanation. All right. There are other stories to bring to your attention. Here's another short one I saw on CNN yesterday. A militarized conspiracy theorist group. That's a new way of referring to it. I guess we're talking about militias. A militarized conspiracy theorist group believes radars, that is to say, in particular Doppler radar, they've adopted as their nemesis, are in fact not telling you when it's going to rain and where, but rather they are weather weapons. Yes. And of course, well, I should have said weather weapons. Oh, well, actually, yeah. Now, weather weapons would, of course, be horrific in their own right, but it's that much more appropriate that we use the horror dramatic minor key music because it invokes actual weather. Right. Yes. Weather weapons. Well, you've heard a lot about that, and murdery Trader Green has spent time on the House floor insisting that there were federally controlled weather weapons that make it rain really hard wherever I am, or whatever it is that's bothering her. And of course, they are, because they're weapons, trying to destroy them. What the hell is going on here? Andrew Friedman knows a little something about it and tells us via CNN, National Weather Service offices around the country are now on guard. You didn't think you needed guards, but now you do. After recent threats to agency infrastructure, specifically Doppler weather radars, from a violent militia-style group. Emails from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Security Office show. By the way, you're all fired. You don't need security for weather, guys. Yes, you do. But the teenagers at Dodgy don't know that. What do you mean, weather security? All right. Well, Doppler radar, if you've ever seen them, they are squat little towers. You know, they're tall compared to you and me. But anyway, they're not like giant radio antennas, but they have that big white dome. Looks like a golf ball on a tee, right? Sort of. Maybe you've passed one. We have one around here that's associated with, well, it's the National Weather Service thing, but I don't know. I don't know whether they locate them all near airports. It makes good sense to have them near airports, I think. Ours is relatively close to Dulles Airport, but that might just be because there was a lot of open land around there. And, you know, we're near Washington, so national stuff. The group is Veterans on Patrol, which the Southern Poverty Law Center defines as an anti-government militia organization, and they view the National Weather Service's network of Doppler radars as weather weapons, stupidly enough, according to an internal NOAA email sent Monday and seen by CNN. Now, I don't think they mention it anywhere in here, but maybe you also recognize Veterans on Patrol. If I'm not mistaken, Veterans on Patrol was the cuckoo nuts guys who went around the Western Carolinas after the big hurricanes and told people, oh, if you accept FEMA assistance, they're going to seize your land and mine it for rare earth minerals, even though there may or may not be any there, or they're going to, I don't remember what else they had in mind, but they, yeah, conspiracy nuts, but working as a militia. And they were even showing up to disrupt the independent local operators from offering any kind of assistance, like just regular neighbors who are like, I'd like to put out water for people who are volunteering to help clean up. They would like march by and intimidate them. Don't you do this? Like they seem to have some vested interest in keeping things chaotic and not rebuilding Western North Carolina. And maybe it was just pure warlordism at its heart. These guys are nuts, right? So they were just going to, say, well, as long as the place remains in chaos, we can patrol the roads with guns and make it look like we're in charge in Western North Carolina. Anyway, back to the story. A previous email informing the National Weather Service workforce of general non-specific threats was sent on May 1st. Monday's email was more action-oriented, with the NOAA Security Office noting they are aware of, quote, several encounters, unquote, physically or virtually, with veterans on patrol. This group is advocating for anyone and everyone to join them in conducting penetration drills on NEXRAD, that's all caps, Next Generation Radar, NEXRAD sites to identify weaknesses which can be used to ultimately destroy the sites, the email stated, using an acronym for the Weather Radar Network. The group referred to the NEXRAD system towers as weather weapons and claimed that there were, like this one, they claimed that there were no laws preventing American citizens from destroying these weapons. The quote weapons, the email states. Of course, they're going to quote weapon them. Yeah. It's unclear what the group believes the radars are doing. Who knows? They think 5G is controlling people's brains, so why not, right? The NEXRAD, or Next Generation Radar Network, has been in place since the 1990s and detects precipitation. We're talking about weather in the atmosphere. It can also help pinpoint tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, prompting timely life-saving warnings. That might be nice. They do that. The system is also used by the Federal Aviation Administration and the U.S. Air Force, which I guess accounts in our case for the maybe all cases, proximity to the airports. Among other actions, NOAA's security office advises that the NWS implement a buddy system when working at remote sites and be alert for suspicious activity. Do not engage with anyone suspicious. Instead, notify local law enforcement, Monday's email states. The scary part, of course, well, it's hard to get more than one or two workers to get out to a remote site, especially as Dodgy has fired so many of them. It will be difficult to find buddies, but maybe that's by design. I don't know. Of course, the other problem is if you notify local law enforcement, there's a 75% chance that they're a member of Veterans on Patrol and won't help you, or they're constitutional sheriffs and believe things like, yeah, Doppler radar is a weather weapon. The NOAA emails indicate the FBI and other law enforcement authorities are aware of the militia-style group's activities and are tracking them to join them, and have issued bulletins about the NEXRAD threat. CNN could not independently confirm the FBI's involvement. The security threat comes at a time... Oh, that's interesting. Well, it depends on how you want to read that one. CNN could not independently confirm that the FBI gave a crap one way or the other because Kash Patel was dressing up in camouflage clothing and joining Veterans on Patrol. Maybe that's the story. The security threat comes at a time of turmoil for the NWS, with many offices short-staffed due to hundreds of Trump administration layoffs and early retirements. Thanks for mentioning it. Nobody likes federal employees being demeaned by the administration, but when it escalates to violence or threats of it, it starts to become really demoralizing, said one NWS employee who requested anonymity because they are not authorized to speak to the press, but really because they also thought, oh, MAGA will now target me to do this. And yeah, nobody likes federal employees being demeaned by the administration, but when it escalates to violence or threats of it, that's supposed to be like the line at which polite society says, no, this is unacceptable. But that line no longer exists. It's also the line at which we should be saying, yeah, that's when law enforcement gets involved and starts trying to find out who's doing this. But all we can say now is that it's really demoralizing. And it's demoralizing not only because of the threats to you, but it's also demoralizing to realize you can't really go to law enforcement and have a reasonable expectation that they're going to do anything. Anyway, We obviously deal with some fringe folks every now and again, chemtrails mostly, it says here parenthetically, but specific threats to target facilities is pretty rare, the NWS staff member said. Given the general temperature of the country right now, and we don't mean climate change, this stuff is especially concerning. Okay. Now would be a particularly inauspicious time, by the way, for NWS radars to fail, whether due to mechanical issues or deliberate acts, since the agency has more than 90 vacancies for the technicians that normally repair them. How did that happen? Jeez. The number is likely to change soon since the hiring freeze, or rather, I'm unlikely to change soon. I thought it was going to get worse. Unlikely to change soon because there's a hiring freeze in place at the agency. So they probably fired all the technicians that didn't retire and won't hire any new ones. So if any militia guys feel like now's the time to blow them up, you'll all just be living without Doppler radar and tornadoes will just catch you by surprise instead. See, weather weapons. There was a tornado machine. Now, we destroyed the tornado machine, but it turns out, oops, it was an anti-tornado machine and something. But instead, it'll be, it's only part of the tornado machine. They have a next generation tornado machine hidden underground in a pizza parlor somewhere. And because in retaliation for our destroying their previous generation of tornado machines, that's why they're unleashing all these unwarned about tornadoes on us now. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, well, I thought you might be interested in that one. And let's see, some other interesting things that might grab your attention the way they did mine. We need to get prepared on Ed Martin and get to finishing the profiles that we have read about him partially in the past and bring you up to speed because, here, let me give you this Punchbowl News entry that'll explain the current situation and why it's imperative that even if we don't do this reading here on the show, you'll need to do it on your own. You need to get up to speed on something. Ed Martin confirmation. In doubt, even after Trump weighs in. Ooh. And we know how much he weighs in on Earth. Anyway, what's going on? This is a reminder both that Ed Martin is only U.S. attorney in an acting capacity, even though, as they say, interim rather than acting for some reason for him. That interim appointment is coming to an end, and I have, was it Quinta Jurachik, who is counting down the days, and I think it's very few left in his interim appointment at this stage of the game. And he's up for confirmation for that as a permanent placement, and he's so crazy and threatening that his confirmation is in some doubt. But you have seen what has happened when confirmations are in doubt. The vice president steps in to break ties, and by the narrowest possible margins, people are installed. But the current parlor game is, will it fail for Ed Martin? I guess it failed for Matt Gaetz, so anything's possible, right? So here's the new stuff from Punchbowl News, which will give us an entree to go back and read other stuff about Ed Martin. Why is this such a problem? Well, Ed Martin's troubled bid to become U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia is in real doubt after the Senate Judiciary Committee announced it wouldn't consider his nomination this week. And since the countdown was down to like about 2 weeks left in his interim appointment, it's an issue. Late Monday night, the Senate Judiciary Republicans noticed an executive business meeting. That is, they didn't, oh, look at that. I just noticed that. No, they put out a notice of an executive business meeting for Thursday that didn't include Martin's nomination. Time is running out for Martin, who can only serve 120 days as the interim U.S. attorney before President Donald Trump will have to choose another nominee. Of course, maybe Ed Martin will change his name and will just say, we nominate that guy. Or Trump may just say, I can nominate anyone I want. I nominate him again. Who knows what's going to happen? Anyway, with the May 20th deadline approaching, and Democrats able to hold up the nomination for a week under committee rules, Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Chuck Grassley will have to move quickly next week on the nomination, if that's something he wants to do. But Grassley still hasn't scheduled a vote on Martin's nomination. In the face of overwhelming Democratic opposition, Republicans said Martin hadn't submitted all the required paperwork to be considered yet. Trump and paperwork. Democrats are also pressing for a public hearing on Martin's nomination, which is rare for a U.S. attorney nominee, although he's the U.S. attorney for D.C. That's, arguably one of the top positions. Grassley told Republicans in a private meeting last week that he doesn't want to do that because that'll make it worse for them. The delay in Martin's nomination came as Trump publicly pressed GOP senators to back Martin. Trump has been calling Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans on Martin's behalf, including Senator Thom Tillis, North Carolina, who has expressed concerns over the nomination, according to Republicans, senators and aides. Trump posted a long, meandering statement Monday night. That's true, almost any given Monday night. But this one was calling for Martin's confirmation. Trump tied Martin, currently the acting U.S. Attorney for D.C., to HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Make America Healthy Again movement, which ordinarily would be bad for you, but in Trump's mind, good. What does he say? Ed Martin is going through the approval process to be U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. According to many, but in particular, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his approval is, caps, imperative. He didn't write this. In terms of doing all that has to be done to save lives and to make America healthy again. Ed Martin will be a big player in doing so. And I hope that the Republican senators will make a commitment to his approval, which is now before them. Ed is coming up on the deadline for voting. And if approved, he will not let you down. All caps for that. Martin is a highly controversial nominee with his history of representing January 6th rioters, for instance, and associating with neo-Nazis, both linked. The extreme nature of the nomination was on full display on Monday when Martin sent a letter to Judiciary Committee leaders recapping media appearances he failed to initially disclose. Apparently, he did a number of RT appearances as well as American domestic crazies with whom he's appeared. But apparently he left out like 60 such appearances in his last listing. Martin said he inadvertently omitted links to dozens of interviews, including on Russia-linked Sputnik Radio and Russia Today, as well as Alex Jones's outlet InfoWars. This is the fourth time that Martin has had to supplement his original disclosures with new information. Several Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans haven't yet said how they'll vote on Martin, despite the Trump pressure. We'll see whether he can pressure people into doing this this time or not. Okay, so with a few minutes left before the next break, the question is, do we spend that time reading more stuff about how terrible Ed Martin is, or read a different terrible story for you? Why don't we read a different terrible story for you instead? Let's see if we can get through this one. Oh, I didn't park this. I'm going to have to go and scroll back through Blue Sky to get to this one. Last night I saw someone sharing a letter from, here it is. Is this it? Yeah. Eric Columbus sharing this information. This is Eric is a Obama appointee at DOJ and DHS in past life, litigator for Speaker Pelosi and the January 6th committee, counsel for then Senator Biden, etc., etc. And he says, here, take a look at this thing. It's a deranged letter from Education Secretary Linda McMahon, or somebody referred to her Grandma WrestleMania. Really, Grandma, yes, true, but I don't know if somehow Auntie seems funnier than that. All right, well, at any rate, well, she's not anti-WrestleMania, but okay, you get the idea. Who's she writing to? The president of Harvard University. So, it might be wise to, have someone proofread your letter or just give you an idea of whether it hangs together coherently. It's worth reading it in full because it is nuts, and it is. And we're not going to get it all in before the break, but I want to give you, I guess if you were like the folks at home after production staff hours, sick and tired of hearing all the dumb stuff that I read you during the day, I managed to convince folks to listen to the first sentence only. All right, I'll listen to one sentence. Tell me what it says. Well, here it is on letterhead from the Office of the Secretary of Education, and addressing Dr. Alan Garber, president of Harvard University. Dr. Garber. It doesn't bother with the dear Dr. Garber. He's not dear. I don't like him. Ready for the first sentence? The federal government has a sacred responsibility, to be a wise and important steward of American taxpayer dollars. That's right. I read it to you correctly. The federal government has a sacred responsibility. Yes, it does. To be a wise, yes, and important steward of taxpayer dollars. Well, I mean, it's really the only steward of American taxpayer dollars. That's important. Important, though. Like, I need a word that's like superlative. Well, important. Important is important by definition. I should put that in there. Yes, an important steward. I've never heard those two together.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's not a huge long letter, but there's a lot of nuts contained in here, by which I mean crazy. But it sets the tone, really. I mean, again, I don't know. I can't figure out whether I believe this is something she wrote on her own and just put out without having any staff review it. Ordinarily, I'd say, well, yeah, this is clearly not the product of, a staff-reviewed letter from the secretary of anything. But it is possible that this was staff-reviewed or even staff-generated, because the staff now is as dumb as the secretary is. So what can I tell you? It's really bizarre sounding. And so there's nothing like outright wrong about this. Although here, if you're editing something and if you're sending it to Harvard, probably the Harvard president, probably a pretty well-spoken, erudite type person. He too is going to hang up on important steward. Like, yeah, I mean, it's not that you aren't an important steward, but like normally, I don't know, whenever you don't have to fall back on patterns of writing that other people have used all the time. I mean, that's not really necessarily an indication of anything in particular, but it helps put you in the headspace of somebody who's going to be reading this, who's likely, what kind of headspaces they're likely to be around the president of Harvard. And okay, wise and something, wise and blank. But here you normally would say, like, I wouldn't stop for a second had it said the federal government has a sacred responsibility to be a wise and judicious steward of American taxpayer dollars. Very rote to fall back on wise and judicious, I guess, but fine. With good reason, it's rote. You don't want to be hung up on the first sentence and saying, oh boy, this is going to be a doozy. Wise and important steward. How do you even become an important steward of, of anything, of federal taxpayer dollars when you're really the only steward of it? Oh, I don't know. But I'm picturing like Linda McMahon sitting in her office and being like, well, what word do I want to use here? Because you're a steward, and you really should be, in my view, for the federal government, it's really, you should be like the stewardiest steward there is, or at least in the top 5 to 10 most stewardy stewards in history. I think that would be appropriate. But clearly you can't just say that we have a sacred responsibility to be a wise and stewardy steward. So, because that's redundant. I mean, so is wise and judicious, but stewardy steward is even more obviously redundant and clearly going to stand out as bad writing. Dumbness is going to come to the fore. We don't want that. So give me another word. Wise and wrestling. Yeah, I got nothing. I'm just a wrestling-brained person. Important. Okay, what kind of letter is this? It's an important one. All right, important. Important it is. The federal government has a sacred responsibility. That's true and big and, rhetoric that you might not call out as weird. And people say that all the time. Wise and importance or sacred importance. Steward of American taxpayer dollars. Okay, what else have you got to say? Harvard University, that's you guys, despite amassing a largely tax-free $53.2 billion endowment, parentheses, larger than the GDP of 100 countries, close parens, maybe even accurate, right? Receives billions of dollars of taxpayer largesse each year. By the way, I just wanted to point out, it just struck me here as I'm reading and complaining about every other piece of stupid in this, but here's the gist of it, right? Despite the fact that you have a largely tax-free $50 billion endowment, you still get taxpayer dollars, or in other words, billions of dollars of taxpayer largesse, Largess. What's the problem? That's not, is that right? Is that correct? Because I was like, oh, look at this. Largesse is spelled with an E on the end, or at least that's my. But is that? Though they do list here, it's unclear to me. I'm gonna have to look at an actual dictionary definition entry rather than what comes up at the top of. Yeah, all right. So Mom says largesse with an E. I do too. But here's the way it comes up when you Google the thing. Dictionary comes up, right? Largesse, Largesse. But underneath is listed, of course, part of speech, noun. Then it says, so noun, and then the next line says noun, Largess. No E. Is that supposed to mean it's an alternate spelling that's accepted in wrestling? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how it goes over at Harvard. Here we are. So the Merriam-Webster entry for it. I got to go to a name brand. Largesse with an E, noun. Variance, it does list that, or it says or less commonly without it. Largess. Which, less commonly. Well, wrongly with an S. Potato, Potato. Less commonly, Toe. Like Dan Quayle, who was apparently unfairly framed with that, but okay. Less commonly. All right. It's not the most important of the aspects of this letter. That's clear. So, federal government has a sacred responsibility to be a wise and important steward of American taxpayer dollars. Harvard University, which sucks, is basically where she's going with this. Despite amassing a largely tax-free $53.2 billion endowment, larger than 100 different countries' GDPs, receives billions of dollars of taxpayer largesse each year. Receiving such taxpayer funds, ready to fall back on a pablum, solipsism, is that the right word for it? Anyway, receiving such taxpayer funds is a privilege, not a right. Yeah. Yet, instead of using these funds to advance the education of its students, Harvard is using it to make them dumber, is using it to indoctrinate them, right? No, that's not what you're going to follow up with. Instead of using these funds to advance the education of its students, Harvard is engaging in a systemic, not systematic, but systemic pattern of violating federal law. Wow, violating federal law, that's bad. How so? Why do you ask? Look, the next thing I want to tell you is, after telling you you've engaged in a systemic pattern of violating federal law, what's the follow-up? Here, I guess, is supposed to be the many ways, the myriad ways in which Harvard is violating systemically federal law. Where do many of these, quote, students come from? Who are they? And how did they get into Harvard or even into our country? And why is there so much hate? Capitalize all the words of HATE, hate. Wait a minute. You said we're violating federal law. What do you mean? Well, where do these students come from? What country? Who are they? How do they even get into Harvard or even into our country? What are you saying? I don't know, but the problem is hate, and it's the hate that they have for somebody, something. And I think in her brain this is, I'm talking about Palestinian students who are, angry about it being mowed down by Israeli forces and their family members being killed. And they come and they protest against that. And the rhetorical game is, that's actually anti-Israel, so that's anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is hate. Why is there so much hate for being killed? Well, anyway, even if that's not what they're thinking about, the logical leaps are insane. Like, already the president of Harvard is throwing the letter out, burning it, thinking about jumping out the window. Oh my God, you've made me so stupid by reading this, and my intellect is everything to me. I have to kill myself. Maybe. I doubt it. He's not going to pull the trigger on that one, but it just makes you feel bad about being human the same way this person is. And this person is the Secretary of Education. Anyway, she goes on. This is only the first paragraph. These are questions that must be answered, among many more. But the biggest question of all, why didn't I lead with it, is why will Harvard not give straightforward answers to the American public? That's the biggest question. Why will you not give a straightforward answer? What was your effing question again? Excuse me? I don't even know how to answer it straightforwardly. All right, if I go back and read it, where do the many, quote, students come from? Everywhere. Who are they? I don't know. I mean, what do you want? A list of names? We can provide that. Who's a student at Harvard? Yeah, what a huge question that is. How do they get into Harvard? We decide whether to let them in or not. How do they even get into our country? Well, in most cases, if they're coming from outside the country and they're accepted as students to Harvard, they get visas, student visas. And why is there so much hate? Generally, what's wrong with humans? Why is there so much hate among our students? There isn't. Why is there so much hate, meaning anti-Semitism? You want to drill down and get right to that. Why? The biggest question of all is, why will Harvard not give straightforward answers to the American public? About what? Which? What part of those questions? What the effing F are you talking about, you WrestleMania idiot? I can't believe you're the secretary of anything. But there's more. That's the first paragraph. Harvard University has made a mockery of this country's higher education system, hasn't it, though? It has invited foreign students who engage in violent behavior and show contempt for the United States of America to its campus. That little phrase belonged earlier in the sentence. It doesn't flow, right? It has invited foreign students to its campus who engage in violent behavior. They do not. And show contempt for the United States of America. Maybe, but whatever. And that's just, but that, I think we're aiming at pro-Palestinian protesters at this point. But she won't just say it. Why? The biggest question of all, why will Linda McMahon not give straightforward answers to the American public about what her accusations are? I don't know. In every way, Harvard has failed to abide by its legal obligations. What? Which ones? Its ethical and fiduciary duties. Oh man, those are big words, ethical and fiduciary. Its transparency responsibilities, and any semblance of academic rigor. I think. I am not sure if the wrestling lady knows, what academic rigor looks like, so she can decide whether there's any semblance. I mean, what? Who should I believe about the realities of academic rigor? The president of Harvard University or the president of the World Wrestling Entertainment Empire? I don't know. What you gonna do, brother, when you gotta find out who's got the academic rigor? I don't know what to make of this. It has scrapped standardized testing requirements and a normalized grading system, has it? I mean, it has gone to where they say, well, the SAT, we don't know whether it really tells us as much about student, predictive student outcomes as we thought. So we're not going to use it for various reasons. But she wants it back because she did so great on the SATs, I'm betting. Anyway, maybe she did. I don't know. And gotten rid of the normalized grading system. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. This year, Harvard was forced to adopt an embarrassing, quote, remedial math program for undergraduates. Was it? I don't know. Why is it, we ask, that Harvard has to teach simple and basic mathematics when it is supposedly so hard to get into this, quote, acclaimed university? Who is getting in under such a low standard while others with fabulous grades and a great understanding of the highest levels of mathematics are being rejected? Not everybody can go to Harvard. There's not enough room. That's it. Well, but some people understand mathematics and aren't getting in. Well, let them go to MIT. I don't know. That's you see, the DEI is what they're trying to get at, but she won't just say it. Harvard has even been embroiled in humiliating plagiarism scandals. You know what that's all about. I'll skip that part of it. Much of Harvard's hateful discrimination was revealed, last year, by the great work of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, and her committee. As if it were trying to embarrass itself even further, Harvard hired failed mayors Bill de Blasio and Lori Lightfoot, perhaps the worst mayors ever to preside over major cities in our country's history. Well, perhaps. Anything's perhaps. Supposedly to teach, quote, leadership at their School of Public Health. This is like, I don't know, something really bad. This is like, This is like hiring the captain of the Titanic to, I guess, teach navigation to future captains of the sea. Oh, that's what it says. Well, it is like that if you think it's bad. It's hiring the captain of the Titanic who drowned. Oh, no. Did he survive? I don't know, right? He's drowned, didn't he? Did he? Okay, I don't know. You tell me. All I now is remember is the movie. And I'm like, God, what am I can't be depending on the movie for the historical accuracy of this thing. But yeah, right? They had an inquiry. Well, anyway, it would be difficult to hire him. Likely. But yes, it would be like that. It would be like not drowning him and hiring him to teach navigation, which presumably he knew about navigation, but you'd probably be better off hiring the navigator. But anyway, yeah. And to who? Well, I love this. This is like the Trump dementia. Future captains of the sea. Oh boy. Brain pudding. This incomprehensible failure, by which I mean this is in the letter. She's saying the other thing is the incomprehensible, not just this letter. This incomprehensible failure becomes more understandable, that's good news, after reviewing Harvard's management. The Harvard Corporation, which is supposed to competently and professionally manage Harvard's vast academic, financial, and physical resources, is run by strongly left-leaning Obama political appointee Penny Pritzker, a Democrat operative who is catastrophic. That person's catastrophic. Yeah, I don't know. Who is catastrophic running the institution in a totally chaotic way. Harvard alumnus and highly successful hedge fund manager Bill Ackman noted that under her leadership, Harvard has become, quote, a political advocacy organization for one party, unquote. Well, I think he's wrong about that. Ackman has called for the resignation of Pritzker. Do I call for it? I don't know, but Ackman has. Concluding that, quote, the mismanagement here is Penny Pritzker. And noting that any serious corporation would have removed her after a litany of recent failings, and the fact that, incredibly, quote, Harvard is not in a good financial position, unquote. For what? I don't know. According to Ackman, one of the world's foremost finance experts, Harvard's so-called $53 billion endowment is, quote, massively overstated as far as what it's really worth, unquote. And Harvard has irresponsibly taken out $8 billion in debt. Well, if this is true, and I really should have found out before writing this letter, if this is true, it is concerning evidence of Harvard's disastrous mismanagement. It took out an $8 billion loan when it has $53 billion available to it. Well, actually, that would be fairly responsible thing. I mean, I guess she's trying to say it's irresponsible to take on $8 billion worth of debt when you already have $50 billion. Why don't you use that interest-free instead? Well, there's lots of reasons. Well, the money is tied up. It's dedicated for different projects, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know whether they took on an $8 billion loan or not, but the bank probably didn't think it was disastrously irresponsible, or they wouldn't have given the loan. But by the way, remember also that the whole premise of this thing is you people shouldn't be getting any taxpayer money. You have $53 billion. And by the way, a person who knows a lot better how to run Harvard than you says you really don't even have that. It's worth a lot less. So that doesn't help my thing. What would I say? Look, why are you so importantly stewarding crimes, Harvard? I really don't know. Well, it goes on like this at some length. She accuses them obliquely of DEI stuff by saying, let's see, where should we pick up here? So there's the $8 billion of debt. If this is true, it's concerning evidence of disastrous mismanagement, indicating a urgent need for massive reform, not continued taxpayer investment. If Harvard prefers not to change, then Harvard should have no problem using its overflowing endowment, which I just said they didn't have, to fund its bloated bureaucracy. At its best, a university should fulfill the highest ideals of our nation and enlighten the thousands of hopeful students who walk through its magnificent gates. Important gates, I might even say. But Harvard has betrayed this ideal. Perhaps most alarmingly, Harvard has failed to abide by the United States Supreme Court's ruling demanding that it end its racial preferencing and continues, did that happen, to engage in ugly racism in its undergraduate and graduate schools, even within the Harvard Law Review itself. Our university should be bastions of merit that reward and celebrate excellence and achievement, which are importantly important. They should not be incubators of discrimination that encourage resentment and instill grievance and racism into our wonderful young Americans. Anyway, getting to the meat of why she's writing this letter, the above concerns are only a fraction of the long list of Harvard's consistent violations of its own legal duties. Just all this sovereign citizen nonsense happening here. Given these and other concerning allegations, which I won't even bother to name, this letter is to inform you, you stinking worm, you, that Harvard should no longer seek, for some reason, capitalized word, grants from the federal government, since none will be provided. Don't even ask. I'm not doing it. Harvard will cease to be a publicly funded institution, which it really wasn't anyway, and can instead operate as a privately funded institution, which it is, drawing on its colossal endowment and raising money from its large base of wealthy alumni. You have an approximately $53 billion head start, even though Bill Ackman, one of the world's financial experts of most famous renown, to double up on things here, said you didn't have that. But again, back to the $53 billion. You got a $53 billion head start, much of which was made possible by the fact that you are living within the walls of, not of Harvard, the walls of and benefiting from the prosperity secured by the United States of America. I won't have you bad-mouthing the United States of America. So you're living within the walls of and benefiting from the prosperity secured by the USA and its free market system you teach your students to despise. That's what they're teaching at the Harvard MBA. Despise the free market system. The administration has previously been willing to maintain federal funding to Harvard, so long as Harvard committed to complying with long-settled federal law, sure, including to protect and promote student welfare and the landmark decision of our Supreme Court against racial preferencing. Yeah, long settled. Okay, sure, not really. The proposed common sense reforms, which the administration remains committed to, include a return to merit-based admissions and hiring, an end to unlawful programs, that promote crude identity stereotypes, disciplinary reform, and consistent accountability, including for student groups, cooperation with law enforcement, and reporting compliance with the Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, and other, I hope we're getting to the end of this letter. Yes, other federal agencies. The administration's priorities have not changed, and today's letter marks the end of new grants for the university. These requests will advance the best interests of Harvard University so it can reclaim its status as a respected educational institution for the future leaders of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter! ! And now it's beginning to sound like Trump may have written some of this, if not all of it, or Stephen Chung, and handed it over for Linda McMahon's signature, which is neatly inserted electronically in the middle of all this. So I can't imagine what it's like to receive such a letter at Harvard, but it must be dismaying. And I just thought it would be, what can I tell you? important for you to take a look at. Oh, Mighty OCD forwards us something from Kevin Cruz saying, I am 100% serious when I say that Harvard's response to this rambling bullshit should simply be this classic. It is the response of the Cleveland Stadium Corporation from 1974 to Dale Cox Esquire. Dear Mr. Cox, a letter from the General Counsel of the Cleveland Stadium Corporation. Dear Mr. Cox, attached is a letter that we received on November 19th, 1974. I feel that you should be aware that some asshole is signing your name to stupid letters. Very truly yours, Cleveland Stadium Corporation, James N. Bailey, General Counsel. It's true. That's the response they should get. And that's why it's been impossible for Harvard to do anything but decide to stand up against the Trump administration and fight it out in court, because there's really no other way to respond to something like that. All right. I just thought that it was important for you to hear about this one and for us to have a sad laugh about it, I guess. All right. Well, it's just among so many other strange things that really need to... Oh, you know what I needed to update you on and didn't? Dang. Well, I don't know whether we have any reported stories about this one. It might take us another day to get to some good reporting about this one. But I think we probably predicted this at some point on the show, that Donald Trump was going to try to find a way to ignore the fact that Tina Peters, remember Tina Peters, the clerk from Colorado, who, of course, brought her conspiracy theory weirdos in to break into the county storage facility for their voting machines and steal the guts out of one so they could, conclusively prove the fraud that changed the outcome of the 2020 election. And now she's the charlatan who was sentenced to like 7 years in state prison for her idiocy. That Donald Trump was going to try to find some way to convince people, I don't care that she's sentenced under state law. I'm the president of the United States. And that means all of them. And so I'm going to get her pardoned. And he's not just coming right out and claiming the right to pardon her, but he's setting things up. He's now been out on Truth Social saying he's directed the Attorney General to, I don't know what, to look into some ways that the federal government can be used to try to free the innocent political prisoner being horribly and unjustly punished. Well, we'll see whether he just says, I can do it and pardon her and you can't stop me.
NetworksRadio.com.
My guess is he'll take a slightly different route.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning
with David Waldman.
But I guess I don't know that it's beyond him to try to do something like he did with Maine, to try to cut off all federal funds to Colorado until she's freed. But Maine won their case, so I don't know. Anyway, you got to stay tuned to hear more craziness with Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio. We'll be back tomorrow.